Hello and welcome to today's virtual fireside chat with Paul Goddard, President and CEO, Pizza Pizza. Early in his career, Paul worked for several other leading organizations such as Imperial Oil, Esso, in Canada, and Morgan Stanley in the UK. Paul has sat on the Toronto Zoo fundraising cabinet and on the board of governors of Excellent Canada, in which Pizza Pizza is a founding partner. So Paul is also an active member of the Young Presidents Organization. Under Paul's leadership, Pizza Pizza has won a Webby Award for its app, along with numerous franchising and marketing awards, and was recently named one of Canada's most admired corporate cultures in 2022. Thank you for joining us today, Paul. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chantel. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. So now I'd like to introduce our host today, Group Publisher at SJC, Jason Maganoy. Take it away, Jason.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Chantel. And hello, Paul.
Hi, Jason.
How are you?
I'm feeling good.
Amazing. So we're gonna dive right in.
All right.
My first question is always the same, but how are you?
How am I? I'm feeling really good, energized. Maybe it's because it's Friday, but it's good. We're business-wise, things are great. And I feel really good about our business, and team is, I think, having fun and working hard, but it's a lot of energy in the place, and so feeling really good.
That is amazing. And so tell me about your career. Very diverse, like going from energy and into finance with Morgan. How did you end up at Pizza Pizza?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a strange detour when you look at it on paper, and it's strange even not on paper. Yeah, I was an engineer initially. I had a lot of IT background as well, and I went over to London and did my MBA over there in the UK, and I lived there for 5 years. And I still stayed in that sort of energy tech space with some finance, trading, commodity trading type experience as well for a long time. And I came back to Canada. I guess it was 2001, end of 2001. Can't believe I've been back that long. And I stayed in the energy sector. So I worked in different parts of that energy sector, natural gas, electricity, oil sector before that. But generally focused on natural gas, most recently in my energy side of things. And I was chugging along with that. And then in about 2009, I was asked as a favor to come in and help temporarily with the family business, and that being my wife's family business. My father-in-law was the founder of Pizza Pizza, so he asked me to come in and help him out. I had an IT background, I had some strategy experience and things, and he wasn't looking for energy experience, but he was looking for management experience. And I guess it was sort of a confluence of some business skills, some family objective, a favor, and I was able to come in and really performed as CIO, head of technology for a year. We just had a big office move. We'd moved to now Western Toronto, now Etobicoke on Kipling Avenue. It used to be downtown, as some people know, for those of you that are from downtown Toronto. And that was a pretty big deal. So I was asked to come in as a temporary measure just to help out. The previous CIO had actually left the company. And so there was actually a pretty limited amount of time to actually do that. But luckily, we had a really solid IT team that really already had it very planned out. To be honest, I didn't have to really do that much. The team made me look good. We came in, and then I got more involved with enterprise development, strategy of the company itself. And then it was about a year or so after that, as I just kind of got more drawn into the company, that my father-in-law said, look, would you stick around and would you lead it? So I did. And so now it's, coming up to almost 15 years I've been there, I think, as of March. So time flies, but it's been a real adventure, and really enjoy the company, and people are very passionate about the brand and what we're building. So a lot of energy there, and great team. So it's been all over the map, but it's been a lot of fun.
I love that, and you touched upon the great team, the great energy. You're this, when you started, you saw the landscape of the business. You touched lots of parts of it. You guided it through some transformation. As the CEO, how do you actively shape culture? You can create culture in lots of different ways, but how does a CEO, how do you actively shape the culture? How do you promote a positive work culture at Pizza Pizza?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think everyone, first of all, is very different, right? You read a lot of different things, you see a lot of different leaders that set great examples. And I think you have to, number one, be true to yourself, I think. And I think a lot of that is honestly, in my career anyway, has been trial and error. Not so much, at least early in my career, reading management books. It was usually by making mistakes as a junior leader in other companies in the energy space and tech space and things. And I think I kind of learned, you get better at it, and I think you sort of learn your own style and what works. So that's one layer. I think there's sort of slightly different approaches, and the way you present with people, interact with people, motivate people can be slightly different and nuanced. But I do think that basically something that is consistent, as you generally look across a lot of leaders that have done well, is fundamentally, I think, just being very genuine, walking the talk, be willing to roll your own sleeves up, as they say, and do things, do the work that other people might be asked to do, but show that you'd be shoulder to shoulder with them. So that's good. And I think a servant leadership model that many talked about is very good too. And so I guess my experience was always, when I had prior successes versus maybe not smashing results earlier in my career, being a leader, I made lots of mistakes trying to learn and motivate people. And I think there's a lot of different personalities. So I think you have to really find something that works for the team that you have, talk to them, listen to them, and help them shape the strategy along with you. I think the CEO has to really drive it. So for me, I sort of found that a very open, sharing-based, consensus-driven type of model worked really well, sort of very flat, not too hierarchical, in my experience. And for this company, I've worked at a lot smaller companies. I've led some startups. I've worked at some very big companies, as you mentioned, like Imperial Oil, Morgan Stanley, very big national or global companies. But Pizza is a really nice sort of medium-sized company. It's sort of, a lot of people think we're actually bigger and more headcount than we are. We're really only about 175 people, not counting our franchisees and our operators across the country. And then it's thousands of people. But I think in our team, we said, let's open up information. Let's decentralize decision-making. Let's really trust people. And I think, there's different ways to do that, but I believe a little bit in this notion of, I think it's Michelle Gelfand wrote a book about tight and loose culture. So if you have very high standards, you define what you're trying to do as a company and motivate everyone around that, and good vision, good strategy, then I think you can be actually quite loose and decentralize some authority and some decision-making. And that really empowers people. So I think for me, that's worked really well. My father-in-law had a totally different approach. He was a classic visionary, founder, entrepreneur, incredible person. He's no longer with us, which is very sad, but I learned a lot with him. I knew him for many years. I met him along with when I met my wife in 1995. And he's a classic entrepreneur, visionary, but he was very much a command and control personality. And he really felt that it was sort of a hub and spoke model. And that really worked really well for the company. I think if it had not been for his style at the early stages of the company, it would have been very difficult for it to succeed. But then as we went through different stages, and around the time I came in, I could see there was quite a few sort of silos, not a lot of communication across the company. And so I really tried to say, look, we got to really, if you're trying to solve a complex crossword puzzle, which essentially business problems are, you've got to solve vertical clues and horizontal clues. You need people to really build relationships across business units and things. And so I try to sort of open that up and break down those silos. And that involved, some new people, also sort of re-engaging people that have been around a long time and try and shape them a little bit. And I guess that's just what I found in my career worked, whether it's a large company or smaller company. In a medium-sized company, it's easier to do that than a very large global company, of course. But I think that, we were able to do that. I say we because I had a lot of people around me that were really like-minded. And over the years, we really have, I would say it's generation 2 of our leadership that we've had in place, for probably about 5, 6, 7 years now. That has really helped me. It's certainly not just me doing it, but having a very sort of decentralized model with sort of clear objective and empowering people, I think gives people that voice and they feel trusted. And so it feels like a safe place to take some risks and have honest, candid conversations with each other. And that sort of is the atmosphere and culture that we've been able to foster.
Matt, your answer has like 90 different things I want to unpack. It's like, too much. I loved the crossword, like the vertical clues, the horizontal. That's a great way to view things. But I have a really simple question. Silos, like you've created a very flat org. How do you break silos down? Like, what's a really good tactic to break silos down in an organization?
I think there's different ways. I think you need to have people that are like-minded. So if fundamentally you have to attract and retain people and get their buy-in to that philosophy. I think some in a sort of a classic model, if you take a military analogy, it used to be very command and control, and you don't do anything without going up 2 levels and things. But I think if you define what basic ground rules and they fit within the objectives, you can really empower people. So I think if you have a secure leader, first of all, that feels very comfortable empowering people that are beneath them, those people can go and talk to other people in business units or run into the CEO or the CFO or COO or whomever, head of IT, marketing. They should be able to build those relationships. And I think sometimes if you have someone that is threatened by that, then they're probably not the right person, at least for the type of culture that we're trying to build. So we found that our culture did adapt because people that have been around a long time were actually very strong performers generally. but had been used to a more classic model with very functional silos. And so you have to also really use technology to enable that. So first of all, just leading by example, bringing people into a room and sharing more horizontally, like I said, but also getting technology to free up the information, because, you know, a lot of information can be hoarded by certain people that want to retain power. And that can be very negative. It's a power base. And if you have someone who thinks they derive their power from controlling information and drip feeding it to their own teams or other departments, that's not going to work. So I think what we did is we really invested a lot in technology and just the people mentality and the expectation there. And one thing we did do that was very transformative was we actually, and I would say when I talked internally to our team, you know, we really kind of noticed this change in our culture around about 2016. We spent some time with some ex-Navy SEALs down in San Diego as a team build. So we took, 24 people, you know, all of our top people down there, and we spent a lot of time, and really there was some physical toughness, carrying logs and things like that, trying to make you tougher, but it was really more the mental, psychological aspect. And they have a very egalitarian approach there, and they were really instrumental in saying you really almost have to have a boat crew mentality on different projects and missions that is very cross-functional. Otherwise it won't work. You can't just have ultra specialists. It's a totally team-based way, and that really planted a seed with our organization. And we've had some people come since then that are senior leaders, but they've really bought into that as well. And I think that was a really transformational moment. So that was a team building exercise and a strategy session, but getting that external sort of training, it really changed everyone's thinking, I think. And that was very transformational for us.
So I love that idea though, of being transparent with information, like giving people more context. That does create flatness. That's really, really good. And then I love the fact that team building with the Navy SEALs, it's just like, oh my God. So you touched upon it. It's a flat, lean team, but you have franchisees, you have thousands of them. So the future of work is radically changing. There's rise of remote, hybrid work models. How do you maintain culture with all these different types of work, like collaborative? How do you maintain a collaborative work culture with all these different ways to work? How do you keep teams connected, and how do you keep them engaged if they're far apart geographically, organizationally, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think almost every organization is struggling with this in some way, or taking a very defined view, either, you know, all remote or all in the office or some sort of hybrid model. We are kind of in the hybrid category. I think we've gone with a flexible approach. And what we've kind of said is, look, we want to talk to our team. We're going to look at our results and see how we do, see how our engagement is. We do annual engagement surveys every year, and we really stay close with our people and as a barometer for how they're feeling. And so that is very key. I think that, you know, we've gone out sort of with a very flexible, trust-based approach, but we said, look, performance is absolutely key. We have something called PI strategy, which is profitability, innovation, engagement. We want to score very high on all those things and have the data to prove it. And so that's the biggest element of our culture. We expect high standards of performance. Get your job done. Not as concerned with where you do it from, but you should realize that your creativity and your team building and your impact is going to be much more limited if you're remote all the time. So we are nudging people to say, well, you show us that you can be as productive, but we're also going to trust you. If you think you want to be remote, well, be remote. Just make sure that we're hitting our objectives. So I think that has helped. I think found a pretty good balance. If you use how full is the parking lot barometer. I mean, our parking lot's probably 2/3 to 3/4 full every day. I'll be honest, it's a bit later on Mondays and Fridays. I don't know why, but I would say that people are still very much engaged, even those days they're not physically in the office. And I would say one thing for us is that because we've always worked with franchisees that are, you know, obviously we have 200 restaurants just in Toronto alone. We're heavily concentrated here, but we're national, and there's places that are very remote for us. So even before COVID and pandemic, we really had to learn how to continually communicate with our operators that were remote. So in a way, we were able to, I think, use some of those same skills communicating with our staff. I know we have a developer based in PEI, for instance. She's not physically in the office a lot on the IT side, but we're in constant communication with her, and she will come to Toronto at times. So I think we kind of know it's not totally unlike managing franchisees that are disparate, even though we do have field people in those cities and provinces as well, but they can't be everywhere. So I'd say that, you know, just creating a bit of a bias towards being in person, face-to-face, is going to be better for creativity and collaboration for sure. We do worry that the culture will erode if you don't have enough of that, especially with new people and onboarding and all that. So we put an onus on our leaders to make sure that you really make sure you're spending that time building the relationship. And I think using technology again, I mean, we used to have business updates, and it was sort of based on how many senior people could fit in our boardroom, which was not that big. And so you're limited to maybe 10, 15 people, and that's probably too many people anyway. But then, of course, when the pandemic happened, we said we should be having business updates online anyway, and anyone's invited. And so we have business updates now. We have monthly, quarterly updates. Sometimes we have everybody, sometimes we don't. But it's not unusual to have 120 people on a Zoom call with a business update. And it's not just me talking or other people with fancy job titles. We really have a lot of our really working frontline people presenting and working. And so they often say, can I speak at the next meeting and give my perspective and show you what I'm working on? And so that way, if you don't know what's going on in our business, well, then you're just not interested, I guess, because there's so many opportunities to do that. So wherever you're located, there is that use of technology and that desire to have face-to-face contact. So I think we found the balance pretty well. I'd say we probably are pushing more towards a little more face-to-face, but even now we're still doing quite well with that. So the technology and just the openness and sharing of information has really helped that.
Well, I mean, that metric, the pie metric, is that something that you've developed, or is that more of a general kind of like profitability, innovation, engagement? Like, is that something that you've developed, or is that something that you've seen out there over the course of your time?
I came up with that. That was actually right during our retreat in San Diego with the ex-Navy SEALs. That's actually the genesis of that. We talked about, we have a vision of always the best food made especially for you, and we have a mission that's make sure every customer visit's a positive one. We've got a set of principles called the recipe principles based on, respect, recognition, et cetera, innovation, integrity, whatnot. And so there's these different elements. But when we tore apart the acronym, we said, the biggest thing that seems to be the biggest impact, they're all really important, but you could extract out the P, the I, the E, and obviously it's quite easy to do that too for people that maybe just want something very easy to remember, but very, very important elements of 3 pillars. The profitability and the innovation aspect, which has always been a really key part of our corporate, DNA culture since the beginning of 1967. And you can see the innovations that have happened all the way through. And then the engagement. I mean, without an engaged workforce, and the franchisees are part of that, the operators, you just won't succeed compared to their best competitors. So that's been a real focus now for, I guess, 7 years. And I would say that we're really hitting it. Even if you look at our, awards are one level. I mean, there's industry awards. We've been really lucky with a lot of great marketing awards recently, franchisee choice awards, and the culture award we're very proud of, because that really shows, yes, we're a super diverse culture. We're getting a lot of people wanting to work for us and very low churn rate. So there's lots of things. It's not just the financials, but people think it's a fun place to work where there's opportunity, and there is opportunity. So that becomes a very virtuous loop of performance, strong performance based on strong culture. And that's worked well.
So, I mean, your answers are really good. There's just so much to unpack. I'm trying to figure out ways to access it. So innovation.
Yeah.
I do consider Pizza to be very innovative, especially on the marketing side. And it's one of the ways you've maintained relevance since 1967. You have to be innovative. But my question is, how do you ensure that innovation is just not a buzzword? Like, how do you integrate innovation into the DNA of your brand? And how do you ensure your teams are innovative? Like, how does innovation influence employee engagement and performance?
Yeah, well, those are all really good questions. I mean, I would say it's always been such a key expectation inside the company. Even when we recruit people, we want to see some evidence of innovation in their past, and have they started something, even if they ran a lemonade stand or sold the handmade, towels in university or something that has, maybe run a business and failed, or tried a project, and whether or not they succeeded is irrelevant. It's someone that is willing to, I guess, take some calculated risk and just really be entrepreneurial. I think that goes hand in hand with being innovative. And not every functional department has maybe as much innovation opportunity, you could say, on the surface, but I always think there's an opportunity to continuously improve. And so that to me is innovation. It doesn't have to be the greatest new marketing innovation, won a Webby Award. We've done so many things with our technology platform and our food platform, and that is sort of the marketing side where you see the most visibly. But even just in terms of the way that we run our real estate function, our franchising, we've really automated. We use a lot of technology, and we would say that anyone that comes into that area, we want to say, well, how can you help us get rid of paper, get rid of manual processes? Let's keep the work the most interesting, the higher level thinking rather than repetitive tasks. And so no matter what role inside the company, I think that's kind of an expectation that you're going to try and do it better. And so I think it's part of our performance review. The people get judged on the PIE criteria. And so if you have done nothing to innovate at all, I mean, it's sort of a little bit of a black mark, right? And I think people in some of those areas that are maybe less traditionally obvious for innovation, like IT and marketing are very much more obvious. Some of those other areas, I think we just really need good coaching and good examples. And so that's really worked. I think people, they realize that we can't just do the status quo. We got to look always for a better way with everything we do, become more efficient. And it's kind of an innovation imperative. And so it's not just all on marketing's back or IT. Even with operations, like we're in the process of making our entire back office kitchen system paperless. And we're squeezing time out of there for our operators, and providing order tracking to our customers with live visual tracking of the orders, like the third-party aggregators, so that people know they have a time guarantee, 40 minutes free. They can see their order, and it also speeds up our kitchen because they can actually auto dispatch using some AI technology to actually be much more efficient about not just first in, first out, right? Which is kind of a pretty, very ineffective way, especially on a busy Friday night or Saturday night. So I would say in every aspect of our business, you're challenging those people, and you're actually, basing their performance partly on who's more innovative than others. And are you helping the business be more profitable? And are you helping engage others and be engaged yourself? So it's sort of a very, here, what can you do with it? It's sort of, we're kind of pushing people internally to act in an entrepreneurial way. And same with the franchisees too, who are naturally entrepreneurial. But I would say corporately, it's probably a little harder to get that. But I think that I guess our results speak for themselves pretty well, that we have been doing that. And we've seen people promote from within that are really innovative and creative. And then it's contagious. People like that they see a new idea in another area, another department even, and they say, well, that's actually really neat. Maybe I can do something innovative like that as well. So it sort of feeds on itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you have a very strong corporate culture, very on brand. Everyone is very aligned. How do you maintain that? Like, how do you maintain that strong corporate identity and at the same time create flexibility, create adaptability, ensure that you can accommodate as many different perspectives, ideas? You talked about it in the town hall that you have.
Yeah.
Thousands of franchisees coming in, they have frontline experience, they all have different perspectives. How do you welcome those and how do you integrate them into the corporate identity?
Yeah, I mean, that is really part of the art. And sometimes you learn by mistakes as well, or you're too tight or too loose. But I think generally we found that well, because we're just very high touch with our franchisees, especially. We have, a huge team distributed across the country that looks after stores and restaurants, visits them all the time. I mean,
Oh, wow.
and so it's a very, everyone knows who they can deal with at the head office, but they have one operational field contact that's their primary contact. But they can also call me. They can call the head of IT or anyone on his team, or our CFO or anyone on her team. So I think we kind of say, look, you got to be approachable and you got to listen. But obviously it's not the most efficient if everyone's just chaotically calling everyone all the time.
Yes.
So I think if it gets a little too much like that, we can say, well, look, let's use the systems and processes we have in place, but no one should be so high and mighty that they can't be reached by somebody. And so we kind of have this open door policy, no matter if you're in the corporate office or anywhere. I might kick something that I get to another person, but I'm happy to take the call. And sometimes I might say, well, yeah, I'm the best person to handle that. I'm not going to push it off on someone, but it's also, let's be the most efficient. So I think just communicating that. And I think just, it comes down again to the visibility, our principles, our values. I mean, sometimes it kind of gets a bit, I'm not a big corporate speak kind of guy. I don't necessarily buy into some of the latest management thinking all the time. I find sometimes it's a regurg of concepts that have been out for 100 years. But basically, if you treat people well, you tell them what you want to do, and you have clear vision and goal setting, and you can get people on board the bus or the train, then you can give them more latitude. So then I think, and if they stray, and it's innocently, straying off, or they didn't quite interpret what you were trying to do correctly, you can kind of fine tune that. But I found it's better to let them do that. I mean, we've got some franchisees that sometimes get very, very creative. They want to do some of their own marketing, for instance, right? And we'll say, that's not even our proper logo, right? That's a no-no, right? Like that's where we're really tight. We're extremely rigid about use of our corporate branding and artwork, of course. But not every single thing has to be done by our marketing department. So we have a lot of local store marketing tools, for instance, where we'll say, look, here's some stuff you can use in this basket. And if you come up with a great way to, get us into a new setting in a small town, or, create some demand that did not exist before, our franchisees are best placed, better than our marketing department sometimes, to do that. So we'll say, well, that's tight. We're going to be tight with our standards. We're going to give you some tools, but we are going to let you be loose. But you can't start, writing, corporate, treaties out there, or marketing things that haven't been vetted. But we do let them have a lot of latitude so they can be creative. And then basically they secure relationships with new customers in their various markets. So that's kind of one example that I think we've kind of found the balance pretty well.
So the franchisees sound fascinating, and I guess that takes me to my next question. You're everywhere. Like you've mentioned, the 200 plus stores just in Toronto.
Yeah.
Lots of different neighborhoods, lots of different communities. The franchisees are very diverse. Like if you go to Pizza Pizza, you can see like lots of BIPOC entrepreneurs running your organizations. So my question is DEI. Like it's becoming huge. Diversity, equity, inclusion, huge in the corporate landscape. How does Pizza Pizza prioritize it? How do you invest in it? And why is it important? Why is it important in terms of just culture and business impact?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's nice to see there's just, in general, not just Canada, but across the world, it's become such a big, important, movement, or just something that's an expectation of people when they're, especially for public companies. If, private companies, I guess it's a little harder to know.
Yeah.
Are they serious about it or not? But public companies, I mean, especially there, I think you get judged. And I think I guess in a way we're lucky because we've always been so diverse. I mean, I would say probably our franchisee base, especially right from the get-go. I mean, right from the early days of franchising in the late 60s and early 70s. I mean, generally you'd have a very strong immigrant-based entrepreneur, a family that would come in and buy a franchise. And so we have so many cultures represented right across Canada and within Toronto, within Calgary, within any city, Vancouver, Montreal, and then likewise I think partly just due to the richness of Toronto and the mosaic of Toronto, we just have people from everywhere. I mean, and we've said, we're kind of lucky. We just naturally have been so diverse. Let's be even more diverse, because we realize that that's where you get the best ideas. You get, R&D for food driven by our Punjabi community in Calgary was saying, why do we not have a sriracha hot sauce? I mean, this is like critical to my customer market, and they came up with that, not us. I think that, we have really tried to get the balance there. Right. I think, there's different ways to do it, but I think that they've been really empowered, and I think it's just seems to be right. And I think we have formalized a DEI council. We have, that have events. We invited an Indigenous leader, Elder Wagaboon, last summer to come and speak to us and educate us about residential schools and other things. We had a D&I food festival. So we had our creative director posted a digital map outside in our kind of park next to our office, saying where you could plant like a digital push pin saying what country you're from, or what your heritage is, and what kind of food would you like to bring. Mine was a little boring because I go back to England. Both my parents are from the UK, and so I didn't bring sort of roast beef and mashed potatoes, but some other people brought much more interesting things. And it was really interesting to see how colorful we were. Like we represented so many countries across the world, and that was kind of a fun way to just celebrate the differences, right? And so I think we've just really, we asked people who wants to be part of this D&I thing, and we had a number of people that joined that, senior people, junior people, all over the company, and they continually communicate with the corporate staff, have social events. That's a big thing for us. Is everyone works really hard in our company, so we want to make sure we have a lot of fun to balance that. You have to have fun and be passionate about it. Otherwise, it can just be a drain.
Yes.
Eventually, you have to have events to look forward to. And we'll have, we'll pit departments against each other with barbecues, and we celebrate the differences, I guess you could say. And so the more, the better. And that's been something that's really been a key to our success for over 50 years.
Wow. So we talked about the team being like lots of transparency in terms of information, context, very, very flat, small, like smaller than we thought, but very, very broad in terms of franchisee. What's interesting is that because you're a small team, talent density, it sounds like you have a lot of talent at your organization. So how do you keep it? How do you keep talent? How do you retain top talent? What are some tactics that you have to keep talent and then maintain positive, high performing work cultures?
Yeah, it's definitely a really good question. I think that when we look at our data, I mean, we've grown a lot. We've had a lot of new people come in, actually really since COVID as well. But that's really been more like net headcount increase. And yet we've been really trying to keep a line on expense growth just because of the current environment. I think we're just, we're looking at the current economy, and I think there's just general concern. Maybe interest rates have topped out, maybe they haven't, but got to be careful with that. But we've always, I think, been pretty disciplined with our expenses, but we always realize we need new people as well. And we've had a lot of longtime people that, believe it or not, are still fairly young that have been with us, that started maybe in their early 20s. And now some of them have been with us 20 years and they're now, 35 or 40 kind of thing. That really shows that I think we've been able to get a nice mix of newer and older employees, and our retention rate is really, really very good. And so I think that part of it is investing in learning and development. So we really, especially, around COVID time, we actually worked with an external company to help really provide very formalized, modularized training modules, in group and in individual and small group settings with our most junior leaders right up to senior leaders. So that was also a pretty big step, because to be honest with you, for many years, the company did not do that. And yet we still had a pretty good retention rate, but we realized you have to provide people the tools to manage people better. Not everyone just comes naturally with leadership skills, right? I mean, I don't think many people do. So we've really developed that and developed, I think, a common vocabulary. We worked with this group that we worked with actually used a book as a tool called Fierce Conversations, a book by someone called Susan Scott, who basically says you have to have courageous conversations, and the conversation is the relationship with people, and you need to still be respectful, but say what you really mean, and really don't sort of hide behind sort of corporate hierarchies and things like that.
Yeah.
Say what you feel, get your opinion out there. And so I think that created a bit of a common methodology for people to interact if they didn't already have it. So I think that learning development side really helped people. And we noticed like the performance of our, even junior leaders and coordinators really was better. And with that kind of understanding, and then also you have to provide the opportunities. So it's kind of the growth imperative, right? Where you have to show that you're growing the business, and that provides opportunities for people to move, get promoted, maybe go into a different functional area. And so, for instance, we had one of our heads of training. We have a thing called the Innovation and Learning Center in Toronto, where we train all the new franchisees to formalize, classroom curriculum, picture banks of ovens, they're cooking, put them under extreme artificial pressure, like it's a Friday night, and there's an order a second coming in. Can you handle it? It's like Lucille Ball on the assembly line. And so they learn to maintain their composure. But we had an individual there who actually said, I really would like to go to BC and help drive that market. There were other people there, but he was a senior leader, knew how to train franchisees like nobody. And he's now out in BC as a director of operations out there. And so, he was already quite a senior guy, but now we have other people that have come in behind him in that innovation role. So, if someone moves off, it goes to another role, it creates another opportunity, and people see that. So we have brought some people in because I feel you have to have the best people available to do whatever roles you need, and they have to fit the culture, number one. So we have recruited some really great people from the market, but I would say, generally speaking, we've much more so gone through developing our own internal people, and your internal team sees that, and they see, look, I like the diversity of this place. I like there's opportunity here. Business is growing well. There's good financial results. So there's a future here for me. And ultimately, that's probably my biggest job, even for my senior people, is, am I making sure this is the best place for them in their career? And are they going to develop here more than somewhere else? And so I think we've done a good job of doing that by nurturing that and, attracting the best people, having a high standard for performance on innovation and all that, and just really making sure that everyone kind of lives and breathes the culture.
So you even describing someone who started in their early 20s and is now in their 40s, 20 years they've been there, which is incredible. So in terms of, and you're talking about all the different ways that you create opportunities, people ladder up, they move to other markets, etc. Like this idea of a learning culture, it sounds really important to your team at Pizza Pizza. Like, how do you prioritize that? Like, how do you prioritize learning? How do you create an environment where you can cultivate learning? And why? Like, why should people continue to learn at work? And how does it contribute to the success of your organization?
Yeah, I think it's just vital. I mean, that's one of the steps we took, was this very formalized learning development methodology. And we still work with those consultants on an ongoing basis, and we're providing even more training to more people. I just think, the market is moving so rapidly. The skills required, the interpersonal skills, as well as higher thinking skills, problem solving skills are critical. And so you have to evolve. I mean, I just think no matter who you are, I mean, that's one of the things I learned in Young Presidents. I think I've always thought that way, but the mantra for people in the Young Presidents organization is lifelong learning, right? Everyone should have that mentality. If not, you're going to get, leapfrogged by somebody on the racetrack, right? So I think we do just have that expectation, just like we do on the innovation side, is, okay, what are you doing to improve? So that's part of people's performance reviews. And, you got to show, well, what have you done? And also part of that conversation is for your career development, short-term and long-term. What do you think the gaps are? Or what does your manager or your team think are gaps that you may have, or your areas of interest that skills you want to develop? And sometimes it's maybe not core to your core role, or you might not think it is, but anything that helps you collaborate better with people. I think I'm big on the interpersonal aspect. And that's why we like this fierce conversation methodology, because it was a great equalizer in terms of a standard of how to use conversations to get deeper relationships. So I think we just commit to that. We spend money on that, training people. Our senior people can be a little more a la carte, I would say, in terms of what we think they need. They might go on an exec program somewhere, but they've also participated in the Fierce program. So I think it's sort of a bit of a mixed bag, and it can be somewhat tailored to certain people as well, where we think, okay, that person is fantastic, but they have a gap or an area where we think if they develop skills in an area they don't have, they'll be even better. So I think it's just, again, walking the talk. People know that there's training, there's development. It's sincere. It's not just like a form you fill out once a year. And so I think that, you kind of have to, walk the talk and show that you're serious about it. And then that becomes naturally a motivator. And I think if companies don't feel they got to learn anything and they know all the answers, they're a market leader. It can be a real curse being a market leader, because you can get lazy and complacent. And so we tend to think, well, look, anyone can become extinct if you have that attitude.
So it sounds very busy at Pizza. It sounds very busy.
It is a busy place. It is a busy place.
So how do you emphasize and encourage well-being, and how do you encourage work-life balance, especially for, like you just described, an order a second on a Friday night, right? So how do you encourage well-being? How do you encourage work-life balance? And how does that encouragement produce a really positive work culture? And also, how does it improve productivity?
Yeah, again, I think it's interesting. That's why I think that the hybrid model for us has been a part of that. I think just there's been a change in terms of expectation, and partly might be the vintage of the employee, the age aspect, that generation, if it's a millennial or versus someone that's been around for 20, 30 years, and they maybe have a more traditional view of the workplace, but not necessarily. That's also generalizing a bit, but we see a lot of kind of mixed behavior, but generally you can categorize that a little bit. So I think we've learned to be pretty flexible there too. And I think that's kind of the balance. Again, it kind of comes back to trust. As long as we're getting the performance and the culture is still very collaborative, we're going to trust people to kind of figure out where they want to spend most of their time. And I think that, we do encourage people and really, really insist on them taking vacation, for instance. I mean, years ago, there were people that had banked vacation for, months and taking vacation in 5 years. And we thought, that's just not a healthy way to be. So we want you to take your vacation. Let's plan it. And we want the people to take the times off. We also have floater days and shorter days in the summer, at the weekends and things. And so we try and do, personal days and things like that I think bolster. And we realize everyone has different life situations, whether they're a new parent or a single person living in a condo downtown. You have economic, it's expensive to get around, fuel's expensive, things like that. So we try and, just generally be as fair as we can be, and be listening to people with our benefits plans and things. And we also have, anonymous counseling services and things like that. And so I think people do tap into those other extra services as well when they need to, because there's times that everyone goes through where life isn't so rosy for various reasons, right? It's easy when you're kind of doing okay and you're on all cylinders, but oftentimes there might be a work crisis or a personal or family crisis that's kind of there in the background. And especially through the pandemic, I think we all learned that you've got to be, if we're not already there, you can't just assume someone's having a good day or an okay day. They might be having a really bad day inside.
Yeah.
So I think generally there's a sense of more empathy. And again, if people were continually abusing it and saying, I'm just never coming in, I'm always feeling terrible, and they're never performing, I mean, that might be a long-term issue for us, but we haven't really seen that. We've seen people that they need extra help. We're going to trust them. And I think they kind of find that balance pretty well. And then I think they feel, well, okay, I'm being trusted here, and I know I have work to do and I'll get it done, but I can still feel good about my personal life and find that tricky balance.
And this takes me to my last question, and it's a two-pronged question.
Okay.
What's coming up for you? So holiday season's coming up in 2024. What's coming up for you?
It's gonna be a busy year. We're working on a lot of things. We're coming off a really good year this year, but we have having a strategy meeting with my team next week, and we're gonna hone our strategy a little bit, but we're feeling really good about 2024. There's always a lot of new innovations and things that we'll have coming down the line. So it definitely doesn't get any less busy.
Yeah.
But we're excited, and we're also still building out in Mexico. We've got 3 locations down there, but plans to do more. And so we're really trying to prove out that we have not only capability to be national leading chain, but international potential as well. So that's still early days, but we're pretty excited about the first impressions there. So I think it's gonna be a busy year, probably a little more travel for me on that front, but that's all good. So we're pretty excited.
And that was the segue to my
Okay.
final question, which was like the innovation. That's interesting, like international expansion. How do you decide? Like, you're in Mexico. Why did you decide Mexico?
Yeah, well, really the biggest thing there was a partner that was also a persistent now partner that came to us. Actually, we didn't seek out that market in all honesty, but when we looked
Wow.
at it and really studied that market, once it really came to our attention, we realized it is a very, very fast growing pizza market, and it's per capita wise as well. And there's lots of opportunity there. So I think that is the lens we look through: is what's the size of the market, how fast is the market growing, and how much of a footprint will we need to be successful? And then is there a good local partner that we can, tie together with. And again, they have to kind of fit our culture as well. And I think that's what we found with the group down there. And so we are looking at some other geographies that, since we've entered Mexico, our phone has been ringing quite a bit because people say, can we come here? Can we come there? So we're going to be pretty careful about where we go. We're not going to suddenly expand to 6 countries or something, but we are looking at some opportunities potentially. And I think we learned a lot as well going through the process with Mexico. It was during COVID too, which slowed us down a little bit. But on the other hand, we got to really know our partner really well there, and they came up here when they were able to, and we went down there. A lot of repeated trips, myself and my team, and vice versa. And so really, they've been, really pleasure to deal with. And I mean, people are really excited about us down there. So that I think we can scale that and show that we know how to do that, and we can port that to other markets potentially.
Wow. And now that you're getting into other markets, like what is your threshold for risk? Like, what's your runway there? Like, how will you know you have traction? How will you know you're sticky? How do you know that, okay, we made it in Mexico? Like, what are some signals you're looking for?
Well, we know, at a store unit level, we have certain criteria, and we know, it's different in every market, even within Canada. We find in Canada, for instance, it's a much more mature market. It's still growing in certain places for sure. And overall it's growing, but some parts slower than others. So for us, it's probably about a 2-year, sometimes even 3 years for a new franchisee to really get to like a really solid cash flow level, sales volume thing. So it does take time. That's a brand new store in a new market. If someone's taking over a restaurant, then they're inheriting a market already, but it can be quicker than that. And so I think there's that level at the store level. And I think generally there's a level where you get to, it can depend on what size market you're in. Like right now we're in Guadalajara, quite a large city in Mexico, one of the largest. But we think once you're up to probably 20 restaurants there or so, you're going to have a really big impact. And that's what we found in other markets like Quebec. We started with 5 or 10, and it was quite slow going originally when we were there, but now we've got over 65. So it's really exploded in Montreal and now elsewhere in Quebec. And in BC, we have, over 3 dozen now, I think about 36. And so once you get to that level, that's where you really are known, and you're a key player in pretty much any market. But it does take time. So yeah, you do have to have a pretty good risk tolerance. You have to have some patience, and you have to tell your franchisees, look, it's going to take a little while to work up to a level. But we also try and be alongside them and really help them as much as we can, and help them with extra marketing or whatever we can do to make sure that they, have a good chance of success. So our track record's been pretty good there. And I think that's kind of obviously another layer of risk when you go to another country, unless you're dealing with a local partner, which is more likely the model we would go with rather than parachuting in a ton of Canadians into those markets. We probably have a little bit of that, but it mainly be driven by experienced groups in those local markets that kind of know how to do it.
Wow. And that's a great story. Just Canadian company, iconic Canadian company, known all across, like everywhere. You're going to be known in the globe, and that's exciting to hear. And that's a lot to be.
We're still busy in Canada. We've got lots to do here too, but we do see we see lots of growth in Canada too, especially with BC and Quebec. But we certainly are excited about that, the prospect of more international. So keeps it fun, and I think there's lots of people excited about that prospect. So,
Paul, thank you so much for joining us, and also, it sounds like you're having fun.
I am. Yeah, it's great.
It does sound like you're having fun.
I was just with my marketing team yesterday. I mean, they were talking about 2024 and some of the plans they have for both brands, Pizza 73 and Pizza. It was a fantastic session. And so the energy that you gain from being around your people that are firing off ideas, it's pretty contagious too. So I think we work hard, but we have a lot of fun. And the nice thing about pizza is it's something I think that's easy to become passionate about.
Yes.
And that's sort of our mantra, is everyone deserves pizza. And, we're really trying to make sure that everyone has fun with pizza as well.
It's a good core product. Really good core product. Thank you again, Paul.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Okay.